Why does God destroy Jacob's hip? You know, it's interesting. We read the story of Jacob wrestling with God in Genesis 32 and think, what a strange encounter. A man wrestling with God, holding on for dear life, and then God touches his hip and dislocates it? Why?
Welcome to A Call to Arms, a voice for truth in a world gone mad. We cut through chaos with biblical clarity and bold commentary to help you stand strong. For more, visit battlearmor.org.
Why would God cripple a man who's clinging to him? Why would God maim Jacob at the very moment he's seeking his blessing? Why does the Almighty break a man just before he blesses him? It seems mean, even harsh, until you step back and see what God was really doing in the dark that night by the Jabbok River, because it isn't just Jacob's story. It's yours, it's mine. It's a story of anyone who has wrestled with God when the schemes ran out, the strength ran out, and there was no one left to manipulate, no trick left to play, no door left open to knock on. This is the story of how God sometimes breaks us so he can bless us. A life of schemes and striving. Jacob's life up to Genesis 32 is a masterclass of manipulation. His very name means supplanter, or he who grabs the heel, and that's exactly how he lived. He tricked Esau out of his birthright. He deceived his father Isaac to steal the blessing. He outmaneuvered Laban with breeding tricks and negotiation tactics. He ran from confrontation and conflict. Jacob's always had a plan, always had a trick, always had a way to make life work on his terms. But now he's cornered. He can't go back. Laban's behind him with a score to settle. He can't go forward. Esau's coming with 400 men. And the last time they were face to face, Esau vowed to kill him. This is where we find Jacob, alone, afraid, and out of options. And in this moment of total vulnerability, God shows up, not as a counselor or a comforter, but as a wrestler. The wrestling match. God meets us in our struggle. Genesis 32:24 says, "So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak." Let that sink in. God initiates the wrestling. God came to Jacob not to pat him on the back, but to grapple with him, to force him to contend, to struggle. And why? Because Jacob needed to face himself. This was more than a physical match. It was a soul-deep confrontation. It was as if God was saying, Jacob, you've spent your whole life wrestling with me. Now it's time to wrestle with me. You've grasped at the heel. You've grasped at birthrights, blessings, flocks, and family. Now grasp me. You've schemed your way through everything. Let's see what happens when your tricks run out. The night is long. The match is brutal. Jacob holds on with every last ounce of strength. And just when he thinks he might prevail, God does something that changes everything. The breaking point. God dislocates Jacob's hip. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched. That's Genesis 32:25. With a mere touch, God shattered Jacob's strength. Make no mistake, God wasn't losing the match. He was letting Jacob wrestle, letting Jacob strive until he had nothing left, and then he breaks him. Why? Because sometimes God has to break the part of you that you depend on the most, so you'll depend on him instead. The hip is the largest weight-bearing joint in the body. In the Hebrew culture, it symbolizes strength and stability. When God dislocated Jacob's hip, he was removing Jacob's last refuge of self-reliance. Jacob's schemes were gone. His family was out of reach. His strength failed him. And all he had left was God himself. And that's exactly where God wanted him. The clinging. I will not let you go unless you bless me. Verse 26 is a turning point. Then he said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. This is no longer Jacob fighting God. This is Jacob clinging to him. Do you see the shift? He's no longer wrestling for dominance. He's desperately holding on for dependence. He's no longer trying to win. He's finally surrendered. Jacob's hip is destroyed, his strength is gone, but something beautiful emerges. Faith born from desperation. When God cripples Jacob, Jacob finally lets go of everything else and grabs hold to the only one who can bless him. That's not weakness, that's not defeat, that's faith, the kind that God honors. The blessing, your name shall be Israel. God asked Jacob his name, that's verse 27, not because he doesn't know it, but because Jacob needs to confess it. He says Jacob, admitting he's been the deceiver, the manipulator, the striver. And God responds, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Genesis 32:28. Israel means God wrestler, or he who strives with God. But it's more than a name change. It's an identity transformation. God is saying you're no longer defined by deception. You're defined by the encounter with me. This is always the result of divine wrestling. God wounds, but he also names. He cripples, but he also crowns. He breaks, but he also blesses. And the blessing is not about wealth, power, or protection. It's about belonging. It's about being known and changed by the living God. The limp, a mark of mercy. Genesis 32:31 ends with a haunting image. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Jacob walks away limping. He will always limp. And yet, he walks away blessed. He limps, but he knows God. He limps, but he's been renamed. He limps, but he finally knows who he is. What seems like a curse is actually a mark of mercy. The limp is a permanent reminder of the night God brought Jacob to the end of himself and became his only hope. And that's often how God works. God breaks us to heal us. God didn't destroy Jacob's hip because he was cruel. He did it because he was loving. Hebrews 12:6 says, the Lord disciplines the ones he loves, and he chastens everyone who accepts as his son. Sometimes the discipline comes as hardship. Sometimes it comes as a limp. Sometimes God lets us fall apart so he can put us back together rightly. Jacob's limp is what Paul would later call a thorn in the flesh. That's 2 Corinthians 12:7-10. A weakness that leads to greater strength because it drives us to God. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. That's 2 Corinthians 12:9. Jacob walked with a limp, but he also walked with God. And isn't that better than walking tall without him? Your limp is not a curse, it's a calling. Have you ever come to the end of yourself? Have you ever wrestled all night with fear, shame, regret, exhaustion, and clung to God because he was all that you had left? Maybe you're walking with a limp right now. Maybe your limp is a failed marriage, a prodigal child, a chronic illness, a public failure, a financial collapse, a dark night of the soul. You begged God for help, and instead, he broke something. But friend, listen, your limp isn't a curse, it's a calling. It's a sign that you met God in the dark, and he didn't leave you unchanged. It's a reminder that you no longer walk in your own strength. It's a place where striving died and surrender began. When we can't scheme our way out, let's be honest. Most of us are like Jacob. We like to be in control. We think if we just try harder, plan better, pray the right words, quote the right verses, we can fix ourselves. We want God to bless our plan, not break us of our pride. But the gospel doesn't work that way. Jesus doesn't come to partner with our strength. He comes to replace it with his own. He doesn't come to help us climb the ladder. He comes to help us die to ourselves so that we can be raised and walk in the newness of life. The cross, where God was broken to bless. And this leads us to the greatest wrestling match in all of history, the cross. Because there, Jesus, the true Israel, wrestled with sin, death, and Satan. He didn't just get touched in the hip. He was crushed for our iniquities. That's Isaiah 53:5. He was broken that so we could be blessed. He was wounded so we could be healed. He was brought to the end of his strength so we could receive eternal strength in him. If Jacob's limp reminds us of divine mercy in our weakness, the cross reminds us of divine love in our sin. Final thoughts. Don't despise the limp. So, why did God destroy Jacob's hip? Not to hurt him, but to humble him, to heal him, to mark him, to bless him. Jacob's limp was a turning point in his life, not because it made him weaker, because it made him dependent. We spend our lives trying to walk strong. God invites us to walk surrendered. We spend our lives trying to avoid the limp. But maybe the limp is the blessing we never knew we needed. When you come to the end of yourself, you come to the beginning of grace. When you finally let go of your strength, you find His. When you walk with a limp, but cling to God, you walk in victory. So don't despise your limp. It may just be a sign that God met you in the dark and you held on, and He never let go. And here are some Bible verses to remember. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's Matthew 5:3. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Psalms 34:18. He must increase, but I must decrease. John 3:30. Hey, thank you for tuning in to A Call to Arms, where we equip you with biblical truths to stand firm in today's battles. If you found this episode impactful, take a moment to subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Share this podcast with your friends, family, and church community. It's a small action, but it can spark a big movement for God's kingdom. Visit our website at battlearmor.org for more resources, articles, and updates from Battle Armor. Together, we can stand firm in faith, proclaim truth, and shine God's light in a dark world. Join the fight, subscribe, share, and let's make a difference for Christ today.